Make sure your Bibles are still open to Genesis 37. Looking tonight again at here am I, in this case seeking the place of God. Here am I. As years go by, I love Joseph more and more. I understand, I think, Joseph more and more. As years go by and trials come, difficulties come, changes come in our lives, curves come into our lives, things that get changed like we've never thought would happen. But then I can look back at Joseph and I see there was a man who went through all kinds of trials, all kinds of difficulties, all kinds of heartaches, very unique path, but kept himself in the place of God. That passage in Genesis 50 that's so common that I speak about so often, there it says, "And his brethren also went and fell down before his face, and they said, Behold, we be thy servants." This is at the end of, near the end of Joseph's life. His dad has died, and his brothers are worried about him taking revenge. And Joseph said unto them, "Fear not, for am I in the place of God? But as for you, ye thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring to pass as it is this day, to save much people alive. Now therefore fear ye not, I will nourish you and your little ones." And he comforted them and spake kindly to them. The idea is Joseph saying, "Here I am." His life was always seeking the place of God. And as I looked at Joseph's life, I began to realize and think about for my own self, for Joseph was in the place of God every place he went. Are you listening to me? Joseph found himself and kept himself in the place of God, the place God wanted him, every place he went. Not just at the end of his life, not just when he was number 2 in all Egypt, but all through his life he was in the place of God. Now, the place of God wasn't as always conducive to joy, wasn't always conducive to peace, but he had peace because he was in the place of God. In our text here, in our story, where Joseph is being sent to go check on his brothers that hate him, he was in the place of God. When he was in the pit and cast into the pit by his brothers, we have to understand he was in the place of God. When they sold him and they put him on the slave block for auction, he was in the place of God. When he was sold into Potiphar's house, he was in the place of God. When he was in prison, when he was being lied about, he was in the place of God. When he was in the palace and made number 2, he was in the place of God. I'm glad to know that we can always be in the place of God, because God has a plan, God has a purpose, God has a direction for all of us. But this idea that he was in the place of God all his life can only happen for you and for me when we can honestly say, like Joseph here, like Isaiah did, we saw the other day in Abraham, when we can honestly say, as a response in our heart, "Here am I." When I'm not willing to say, "Here am I," in the hard times, in the difficult times, I will not find myself in that place of God. And so we're looking today about seeking the place of God. A person seeking the place of God, saying, "Here am I," seeking that place of God, seeking to stay that. I hope your desire tonight is always be in the place of God. To never find yourself saying, "I'm out of place." To never find yourself saying, "I don't think this is where God wants me." To find yourself in a situation where you say, "This is not right. This is not where I should be. I've blown it. I've missed the path." That we can always be seeking the place of God. So very simple thoughts tonight we see from the life of Joseph. A person seeking the place of God. What does that mean for you? What does that mean for me? So we can find ourselves, even as the pandemic comes, even as the world situation changes and America either flourishes or falls by the wayside, we can still be in the place of God. By the way, aren't you glad your place of God doesn't hinge upon the Democrats or the Republicans? Boy, I'm glad it doesn't depend on the doctors. I'm glad it doesn't depend on the affairs of the world. We just need to keep our eyes focused on Him and make sure we're doing what we're supposed to be doing and say, "Here am I," and staying in the place of God. So very simply tonight, let's go very quickly. Notice a person seeking the place of God, saying, "Here am I," is vision driven. We'll find that in Joseph's case, vision driven. This vision that God gave him, this vision, it drove him. He was saying, this is the vision for my life. This is the purpose for my life. This is God's got something for me. And it drove him. It compelled him. It drove him to do what was right. But not only did it drive him, it delivered him. The fact, the idea is that I've got a vision. God's got a purpose in my life. God's got a purpose for me down the road. And I want to stay in that place of God. And as he was following the vision God gave him, it delivered him. Now, I don't think it delivered him in the way he may have hoped to be delivered. If you can picture yourself as Joseph in the pit, hearing your brothers talk about killing you, and then hearing your brothers talk about selling you, the idea of being delivered from the pit probably didn't include being pulled out and sold to a bunch of merchants to be sold into Egypt. But God delivered him. By the way, do you understand God delivered him out of the pit to get him to Egypt? God delivered him out of the pit even from there. Even what Reuben was saying, he was delivered not as he wanted, but as God wanted. Let's notice vision driven. First of all, a providential vision. A providential vision. The vision Joseph had was of God. Of God. Now I know in the last 20 years a lot has been put out in the corporate world about vision. They say you need to have vision. You need to have a vision for your life. You need to have a vision for your finances. But it's a good thing to have vision. It's a good thing to have those things. The Bible says where there is no vision, the people perish. But it talks about following the things of God. But let's elevate this idea of vision to God's vision. A providential vision. A vision we get from God. Not something I stir up, not something I just want, not just something that sounds good, not just something I desire, but a vision, a purpose for my life, or in the case of Joseph, this dream, which showed him the vision God had for him. And let's get our vision from God. I hope tonight you say, I've got a vision, I know a purpose, I've got a dream that God has given to me. And I guarantee you that's the best vision. I guarantee you that's the most powerful vision of our lives. So it's a providential vision, but not just vision driven by a providential vision. It was a presented vision. A presented vision. In other words, God gave it to him. He did not just go out and try to come up with the vision. He did not go out and seek it. We saw that he was there. God gave him this vision through those dreams. And that was a forerunner of what was going to happen. That was a predictor of what was going to happen. So it was a presented vision given by God. Here's our problem. We want to get a vision and then try to get God to okay it. We get a direction for our lives. Say, I think this is what I want. I think this is what I desire. Now, God, what do you will you approve this? We know the Bible says if we delight ourselves in the Lord, He'll give us the desires of our heart. But again, our problem is we get the desires of our hearts going and ask God to bless it. We just got to make sure that we get our vision, our purpose from God. He presented it to him. We find various examples of God giving the vision, giving the purpose to different people. We think of Saul, who was going to become Paul. In Acts 9:6, I believe it's in your notes, and he, trembling and astonished, said, Lord, this is what I want to do. Is that what it says, class? No, he did not say, Lord, this is what I want to do. Can we do this? He didn't say, here's a plan I have. Can we do this? No. His first question was, when he got saved, he said, what wilt thou have me to do? And the Lord said unto him, arise and go into the city, and it shall be told thee what thou must do. So even at that point, he only had a little piece of the vision. Go to the city and wait. And we know a little bit farther down that Ananias went in and says, but the Lord said unto him, go thy way, for he is a chosen vessel unto me to bear my name before the Gentiles and kings and the children of Israel, for I will show him how great things he must suffer for my name's sake. He had a vision of bearing the name of Christ to the Gentiles, to the children of Israel, and even before kings. Can you imagine how that would help him when he was a prisoner standing before the king saying, this is the vision God gave me. This is the purpose God, I'm here for that. And so while he was in prison or while he was standing before kings, he had that vision presented to him by God. We think of the disciples, Jesus giving them the vision to live by. In Mark 4, verse 19, and he saith unto them, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. And they straightway left their nets and followed him. They got a vision. It wasn't of, what do you guys want to do? He said, why don't you make a committee and decide how we're going to do this? No. He said, I've got a vision for you. I've got a purpose for you. I've got a calling for you. So the disciples had that vision. But here's the problem. God may give us a vision, a purpose, but the danger is we'll put our own personal twist on it. God may call a missionary, but a missionary then may take that and put his own twist on it, on where he wants to mission, on how he wants to be a missionary, and how he wants the results. Boy, preachers are that way. Boy, God calls us to preach or calls us to pastor, and we want to put our own twist on it. And our flesh gets in the way of the Spirit. A presented vision. Here's the key. Let's get satisfied with God's vision for our life. You say, well, I don't have a specific one. God's given us a book of a bunch of specific ones, things that you can take. This is my vision for my life. And you can take one of these that we're going to look at very quickly and say, that's my vision, that's my purpose, that's what God's given me, because He has given it to us, until He gives you a specific one. But here's some ones very quickly. In Matthew 25:21. His Lord said unto him, well done, thy good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of the Lord. So one of our visions could be, I want to live being driven by the vision to hear God say, well done, thy good and faithful servant. Boy, we're not going to take the time of it right now, but if you just break that down, well done. In other words, my vision is I want to do right. I want to do well. I want to do profitably. Well done, thy good. I want to be good. Well done, thy good and faithful. Well, just be faithful. Be faithful. Be faithful. Every day, every morning, just be faithful. Servant. Serving. You can just take that as a God-given, a God-presented vision for your life. What are you going to do with your life? I want to hear, I want to live so I can hear, well done, thy good and faithful servant. Ecclesiastes 12:13. The wisest man in the world. God speaking through him to us. Tells us, and it's very simple but very profound, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. He said, here it is. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole duty of God. You could take that as a vision statement for your life right now. He said, what I want to do is fear God, have that reverential awe for God, and keep His commandments. Boy, what a good vision God has given to you, a purpose for your life. And we put those visions in place just as Joseph was driven by the dreams God gave him. You'll find yourself in the place of God all the time. If your purpose is to hear, well done, thy good and faithful servant, you're going to be living so you'll be in the place of God. If you're fearing God and keeping His commandments, you will find yourself always in the place of God. 1 Corinthians 10:31, another vision statement if you're looking for one. Whethersoever you eat or drink or whatsoever you do, do all to the what class? Glory of God. Boy, I say, I'm just going to do everything to the glory of God. I'm going to sleep to the glory of God. I'm going to eat to the glory of God. I'm going to minister. I'm going to work. I'm going to dress. I'm going to sing. I'm doing everything. That's a good vision statement that when we're driven by these statements of God, these providential, presented visions for our lives, we'll find ourselves, if we can say, here am I, in the place of God. Joseph was driven by that vision. For pastors, there's one, 1 Peter 5:2, and most of my preaching is always, as you know, at me, and if it spills over on you, that's good. But in 1 Peter 5:2, feed the flock of God, which is among you, taking the oversight thereof, not by constraint, but willingly, not for filthy lucre, but of a ready mind. Neither being as lords over God's heritage, but being examples to the flock. There's a great mission statement for a pastor, for a preacher, to feed the flock of God. That's what I need to be doing. Be working on taking the oversight, not by constraint, but willingly. So we've got a presented vision. You need to know that God gives you this vision, God's vision, and God presents it to us. You need to seek God. What is it you have for me? What do you want in my life? So not only was it a presented vision, it was a persecuted vision. A persecuted. But see, Joseph says, I'm in the place of God at the end of his life. But he was in the place of God all the way through because he was vision driven. This vision of having the dream where his brothers were going to bow down to him one day. That one day his dad and mom and his brothers would bow down. We look at it and we say, we're like Joseph's brothers. We wouldn't like that. But the idea is that was just God saying, I'm going to put you in a position where they're going to have to come to you. I'm going to put you in a position where you'll be over them to help them and encourage them. But that vision also we find was a persecuted vision. Bible says they hated him for the dream that he could not help. He couldn't help the vision. He had this dream. It says they hated him the more far. This vision that he had, this dream that he had, he could not help the vision God had given him. He couldn't help the purpose God had given him. He couldn't help the fact that God was going to use him and hadn't chosen one of the older brothers or taken one of the others. But he said, oh, God had chosen him. And so we find it was persecuted. They began to hate him for his vision. I got news for you. The world may hate you for the vision you have for serving God. The world may be upset with you for having the vision of serving God. So he was hated for the dream he could not help, and he was hated for the words that I believe needed to be said. In my younger years, as I would read that about Joseph, God never said it was wrong for him to say that. But how many of you, like me, were thinking sometimes, Joseph, you shouldn't have said that? You say, Joseph, that was dumb to say that. Because we, I think, impress our sinfulness onto Joseph. We impress our pride onto Joseph. Why would I say that? I would say that to make others think good of me. I would say that to put them down. I would say that in a boastful way. We have no indication that was Joseph. Joseph was saying, I've got something from God. We don't know the manner in which he said it. But looking at Joseph's life, looking at Joseph being a model and a picture of Jesus Christ, it could very well be, he says, fellas, God's given me something. Let me help you with it. Let me give you a vision for you that God's going to do. I don't know how he did it, but he said it. Words that he felt needed to be said, and they hated him for it. Boy, they hated him more and more. Joseph being a great leader. I think I've got it there in your notes. Something that I have to remind myself of daily. People in leadership, is that in there? Yeah. People in leadership need to be thick-skinned, soft-hearted, and strong-backboned. I mean, you just have to be that way. You need to be thick-skinned. Boy, they came after him and they says, boy, we're not going to do. Who do you think you are? You're so full of pride. Think you're so mighty. You think you're so special. Boy, they just went after him. You need to be thick-skinned to say, that's all right. That's all right. It's not going to hurt me. It's not going to stop me. But at the same time, be soft-hearted. We know he had that because when they showed up years later, he cried for them. The ones that were going to kill him, the ones that blasphemed him, the one that spoke down to him and criticized him, yet he had a soft heart for them. See, when you're in leadership or trying to serve anybody, you're going to need to be thick-skinned. The devil's going to make sure anything that they can pierce your skin is going to be said to you. Hello, are you out there? As a parent, you need to be thick-skinned, but soft-hearted. As a spouse, you need to be thick-skinned, but soft-hearted. Soft in the heart, compassionate in the heart, but not letting barbs affect you. And then, of course, strong backbone. Go ahead and do what God wants you to do. So we can understand it. Vision driven. How in the world did Joseph go all he did? How could he at the end still say, I'm still in the place of God? I was always in the place of God, because he was vision driven. He said, God's got a plan for me. God's got a purpose for me. And I've got to be in the place of God. If I'm going to be in the place of God, I've got to stay in the place of God. And I have to start in the place of God. So vision driven. You and I need to have the vision of God given to it, presented to us. And then even if we're persecuted for it, say, no, I'm following what God would have me to do. So we find a person who's seeking to be in the place of God, who says, here am I. Here am I. Vision driven. Number 2, submission oriented. Submission oriented. That's key to here am I. Here am I. Notice what he says in verse 13 of our text. And Israel said unto Joseph, do not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send them unto thee. So here he already knows what he's going to be told to do. He already knows he's going to go check on his brothers that hate him. He's going to go check on his brothers that no doubt have threatened him before, that no doubt have done some really mean things to him already. He said, I'm going to send you to check on him. And he said, oh, Daddy, please don't. No. He said, here am I. He was submissive. Submissive. Now, what's vital is we look at that and we see the big outcome. That day, it was a little thing. Joseph, go check on your brothers. Oh, okay. How many understand everything changed when he went to go check on his brothers? Obedience in the small things have big effects. Listen to me. Obedience in the small things have big effects. Here he is. He says, "Here am I." Jesus said in Luke 16:10, "He that is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in much." In Matthew 25:21, the Lord said unto him, "Well done, thy good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of the Lord." So this idea of these little things, being submissive, having that heart of being submissive, that was Joseph's heart. He had that submissive spirit. He had that being submissive in his orientation. And being submissive in the little things has big effects. For example, King Saul. King Saul, that idea of going and finding his daddy's donkeys. By going out to find his daddy's donkeys, he ended up becoming the first king of Israel, because there, as he went out, he went to find the seeker. And because he was diligent in that, he said, "I've got to find him. We can't find him. Let's go over here and let's talk to the preacher and see if the preacher can help us." And God says, "There's the man coming." And because he was faithful in that little thing, because he was submissive in the little thing, he says, "Go find my donkeys," that he was made king. As David, in the little things, his daddy said, "David, go deliver cheese to your brothers." I mean, just go take lunch. Brought him to the greatest battle of his life. Changed his life. Brought him to the presence of the king as he defeated Goliath. The widow woman, feed the preacher. Feed Elijah. Wow, what a change. So we find this submission-oriented heart. Being able to be submissive. Because little things, being obedient in small things, have big effects. That means there's no request of God too small. Are you listening to me? There is no request of God too small. If God says, "Go talk to that person, leave that person a track, or make sure that you're here," or do that, there is no request too small. It may have major, major effects. You know, there's a lot of things that affected our life that we're not even aware of just because we were submissive or obedient in those small things. There's no job too insignificant. No job too... Joseph, go check on your brothers. I wonder if he ever, when it found himself there in prison, thought, "I wonder if I really should have gone and checked on my brothers." It all started when God said, "Go check on my brothers." But he was in the place of God. Very quickly, he was submissive to him that rebuked him. He was submissive to him that rebuked him. When he told his father, look at verse number 10. "And he told it to his father, the vision, the dream, what God was going to do. And to his brethren, his father rebuked him." Yes, his father later considered it and thought about it, obeyed or observed the saying, but he rebuked him. He gave him the vision. He told him what God was going to do, how God revealed it to him, and his father rebuked him. And now, but even though he just rebuked him, still he was submissive to him because that was of his place. Well, how many times we say, "I've had it. They shouldn't have said that to me. I will not submit. They should not have said to me, 'All right, Dad, yeah, I'll go look for him for a little while. I'll go look around the corner.'" No, but he was willing to submit even to him that rebuked him. Again, that goes back to being thick-skinned, but also wise-hearted. In Proverbs 13:1, "A wise son heareth his father instruction, but a scorner heareth not rebuke." A scorner won't hear rebuke, won't listen to it, won't understand it. Ecclesiastes 7:5, "It is better hear the rebuke of the wise than for a man to hear the song of fools." So children, take the rebuke of your parents, but still submit. Still submit. Employees, you may get rebuked by your boss, but still submit. Get over it. Get past it. Get a life, as I often said. I believe he did probably what he did not want to do. "And Israel said unto Joseph," in verse 13, "Do not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send thee unto them." The ones that hate you, the ones I just rebuked you about. They probably had a family powwow because he told his brothers and he told his dad. And his dad and his brothers, boy, they just went on to him. He said, "I want you to go check on him." And he said, "Here am I." He was submissive to him that rebuked him because that was his spot. He could take it. He was submissive to those that ruled over him. That ruled over him. Potiphar. I mean, he got sold as a slave, and so in Potiphar, he was submissive to him. He had to be submissive, or Potiphar would not have put him in a position that he did. He would not have given him that leeway. But he was submissive to one that ruled over him. Boy, we are so rebellious. Up. You know, just sometimes when we read in the Bible about obey them that have the rule over you, boy, immediately our back tenses up. Rule over me, huh? Whoa. But he was submissive to Potiphar, to the jailer. Submissive to those that ruled over him. In other words, those that were ruling over him out of his control. It was out of his control to have them rule over him, but it was not out of his control to submit to them. Are you listening to me? If we can just understand that, we say, well, they're ruling over you. Boy, I'm going to fight. No. Has God put them there in that spot? I need, as much as I can, to submit to them. Submissive to those that ruled over him. Submissive to those that reigned over him. That reigned over him. We think of Pharaoh there. When the Pharaoh called him up, he was submissive to him. He says, God will interpret the dream. I will do that for you. I will help you with that. Let me give you some insight. He had just been in the king's prison for years. And now the king calls up, and instead of him saying, I'm going to show the king, no, he was still submissive to him. Submissive. Joseph was a great leader. It was obvious he was a great leader. But to be a great leader, he and us need to learn to be great followers. Are you listening to me? Let me chase a rabbit for just a little bit. To be a great leader, you need to learn to be a great follower. You have to understand position. We have to understand prerogatives. To be a great leader, to be used of God. One of my favorite little passages is in Matthew 8, verses 9 and 10, where the soldier came to Jesus to have his child healed. He said, for I am a man under authority, having soldiers under me. He said, I'm under authority, and I have people under authority under me. He understood position. He understood I got people above me, but I have people below me. He understood that. And I say to this man, go, and he goeth, and to another, come, and he cometh, and to my servant, do this, and he doeth it. When Jesus heard it, he marveled and said unto them, verily I say unto you, I have not found so great faith, no, not in Israel. So to be a great leader, we find throughout the Bible the greatest leaders because they started as the greatest followers. We think of Joshua and Moses. Moses, a wonderful leader, a great leader. So was Joshua, but Joshua started as a servant to Moses, as an understudy to Moses, as just a general under Moses. And so Joshua became a great leader because he learned how to be a good follower to somebody else who told him what to do. We think of David and King Saul. Now, King Saul ended up hating David, but I imagine David submitted. Well, we know David submitted to Saul in every way he could. He submitted to Saul, and it helped develop him as a soldier, helped develop him in the kingdomship. Boy, but David, a good leader, only because he was a good follower. Elisha was a good leader only because he was a good follower of Elijah. He washed the hands of... Are you understanding what I'm saying? So you say, preacher, I want to be a great leader and used of God in a mighty way. All right, then we need to learn how to submit and how to be a good follower of those gods who puts above us. If we're rebellious, well, we'll just leave it at that. Submission-oriented. Submission-oriented. Here am I, seeking the place of God. Submission-oriented, very quickly. A person who's seeking the place of God, who can say, here am I, is diligent in duty. Diligent in duty. He has a duty, he says, here am I. Got a job for you, here am I. Say, what are you saying? When he was sent to check on his brothers, he didn't just say, I can't find them. Well, he kept looking. Remember, he was wandering around the field, and finally somebody said, what are you looking for? I can tell you're looking. I can tell you're seeking. You spent a lot of time. You're searching for something. He just didn't stand at the edge of the field and say, well, I don't see him. I guess I'll go home. He was very careful, and he was diligent in his work. Diligent looking for his brethren. I think you've got some passages there we must hurry. Proverbs 10:4. He becometh poor that dealeth with the slack hand, but the hand of the diligent, in other words, you work at it, you're focused at it, you do your best, maketh rich. Proverbs 12:24, the hand of the diligent shall bear rule. Joseph bare rule. How did he do that? He was diligent about his duty. He was just very careful to be what he was supposed to be all the time. But the slothful shall be under tribute. Proverbs 22:29, seest thou man diligent in his business? He shall stand before kings. How in the world did Joseph stand before kings? He was diligent in his business. whether it be in Potiphar's house or with his dad or in jail. Very quickly, diligent in duty. Here am I. So, preacher, I want to be in the place of God. All right, then we need to be diligent in business. Here am I. I've got a duty. Here am I. I've got a responsibility. Here am I. I'm going to be faithful. Here am I. Diligent in duty. Very quickly, he was diligent in his duty to be pure. He was diligent in his duty to be pure. We know about Potiphar's wife and how she tried to tempt him. And in Genesis 39:9, there is none greater in this house, Joseph said to the Potiphar's wife who tried to seduce him. Neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? He was diligent in his duty for purity. Ladies and gentlemen, God has given us a duty to be pure. God has given us a duty, and we need to be diligent about it. That means if it comes on the television screen and it's not pure, we get it out. If a thought comes into our mind and it's not pure, we need to get it out. We need to be diligent. Here am I, my duty to be pure. Here am I will be pure. Diligent in his duty to be pure. By the way, that kept him in the place of God. If he'd have gone ahead and been immoral with Potiphar's wife, he may not have gone to prison. He may have been killed for something else a little later. But he had not been in the place of God. He found himself in the place of God only because he was diligent in being pure. He was being careful that he was being pure, and because of that, it landed him in prison, which was the place of God, so he could be brought up to Potiphar, to the king, which was the place of God. Diligent in duty. His duty to be pure. He said, here am I. I said, I can't do that. He said, I belong to God. He was diligent in his duty. I wish we'd learned this, to be profitable. To be profitable. Do you know you and I have a duty to be profitable to God? To be profitable to those God has placed above? To be profitable. To be of benefit. In Genesis 39:2, and the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. In Genesis 39:23, the keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper. He was profitable. Everywhere he went, he was profitable. He was profitable to his dad. He was profitable to Potiphar. He was profitable to the jailer, and certainly profitable to the king. Very quickly, he was profitable to the hateful. They hated him. His brothers hated him. Aren't you glad he was profitable to them later on? He said, I'll care for you. I'll be a help for you. I'll be a blessing to you. He was profitable, listen carefully, to the heathen. Potiphar was a heathen. He was unsaved. He was not part of God's people. But he was profitable to him. That's why your boss needs to think you're the best employee. Or at least knows that you're trying to be as profitable to them as you can be. But they're lost. But they're foul-mouthed. But they're crooked. Well, okay. Still, you be profitable. Here I am. Here am I. Profitable to the heathen. Profitable to the hateful. Profitable to the hurting. To the hurting. Those men in prison, the butler and the baker, boy, they were hurting. He said, I want to be profitable to you. How can I help you? Tell me what's going on in your life. Let's be profitable to those that are hurting around us. Be profitable to the hungry. We know that there's a famine coming. Boy, he was profitable to them. He didn't say, I want to make sure I get my own or make sure just my family. He was profitable to all those that were hungry. He was profitable to those that were humbled. Again, his brothers, as we read in Genesis 50. Here am I, seeking the place of God. Be diligent in duty. If you're not diligent, if we're slothful, we'll miss that place. Lastly, a person seeking the place of God who says, here am I, must be resilient in spirit. Resilient in spirit. Joseph went through a lot of stuff. You look at his life overall. See, it's easy for us to say, Joseph, buck up, it's going to be all right, because we know the end of the story. But when he's in the pit where there's no water, he doesn't know what's going to happen. When he's being sold, he doesn't know what's happened. When he gets into Potiphar's house and he doesn't know all those things of what's going to happen. But we find that he was resilient in spirit. He was always ready to come back. I believe it's in your notes. It's best pictured in the names of his sons. So after he went through Potiphar's house, and after he was in prison, and after he was forgotten about in prison, and then finally promoted, in Genesis 41:50, and it says, and unto Joseph was born 2 sons before the years of famine came. which Athras, the daughter of Potiphath, the priest of On, bare unto him. And Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, for God. Notice for God. That's like what I've been preaching on Wednesday nights about but God. He said for God. Same thing as but God. For God, said he, hath made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. He was resilient in spirit. He said, man, I had a lot of toil. I was in prison. I was in Potiphar's house, and I was laboring. Instead of being from the wealthy family that I am, I was just a slave in somebody else's house. But God made me forget all that. In other words, I'm not bitter. I'm not broken. I'm not boastful. He said, I'm just resilient. I'm just glad. And the name of the second called Ephraim. For God, there it is, but God hath caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. He was just resilient. He says, for God brought me through. I'm not sure that I could be as resilient in spirit as Joseph was. But he says, here am I. Vision driven. I got to stay in the place of God. God's got a plan. I've got to stay there, so I have to be diligent, so I have to be resilient. Again, he was not bitter. Too many Christians are bitter. Too many Christians get broken. Too many Christians, when things go well, get boastful. But let's just be resilient in spirit. Here am I, seeking the place of God. Simple character, just character, that kept him right, kept him in the place. Here am I. Preacher, I want to be in the place of God. Then you need to develop that spirit of, here am I. I don't necessarily want to do it, but here am I. It's people that don't like me, but here am I. It's going to be hard, but here am I. It's not turned out like I thought, but here am I. Here am I in the place of God. Let's bow our heads, please.